is now being recorded. So we record all of our monthly education webinars. They're made available to registrants that register online via Eventbrite, as well as our Northwest Eco Building Guild members in the member-only content forum. Please mute all of your microphones during the presentations and video today. There will be time after each presentation for questions. And if you have any clarifying questions, please post them in the chat box, and we can address them as we're going through each of the presentations. If you have any specific logistical questions or challenges, please feel free to email me. I'll post my email in the chat as well as my phone number. And we will have a really great in-depth discussion led by one of our speakers at the end. So folks like Kathy and others, if you have some really neat and interesting information to share, please utilize that time to connect, network, and share with our other fellow members and event attendees. A couple upcoming Guild events we're excited to invite you all to. October 4th, that's next week. Is that next week? Yeah, that's next week, is our education retreat. It's going to be virtual. It's a great opportunity to join in on that committee meeting to advocate for green building topics you'd like the Northwest Eco Building Guild to cover next year for the 2023 year. So please join us for that. We'd love your input. It's completely free. And yeah, voice what green building topics you want us to cover and to explore and train and provide workshops on next year. And then October 26th, we're having another education monthly event all about 3D printing for sustainable and affordable housing. So we'll have a really neat lineup of speakers for that event. October 29th, we're super excited to announce the Northwest Green Building Slam. That is a hybrid event. It's taking place in person at Town Hall, but you can also join online. So I welcome folks to check out tickets for that, and which I will also post in the chat. And then December 14th, join us for a super casual holiday party and annual meeting at Jellyfish Brewing. It's where we wrap up the year, share really great success stories, challenges, and just kind of celebrate the holidays and winter. So join us for that. I love to remind folks at all our events to please consider becoming a Northwest Eco Building Guild member. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, all members have access to pre-recorded workshops, webinars, trainings, really great information on everything from the Washington State Energy Code to what is hempcrete to water conservation efforts, everything in green building topics right at your fingertips in our member-only content forum. Also, you get discounted pricing on all events. We also have a code innovations database, and most importantly, you get featured on our Green Pages directory, your business, your contact information, and we get a lot of eyes on that page, and we also send out that directory to a lot of folks who are looking for whether it's a vendor or a builder or a remodeler. So if you're interested in getting on our directory, please consider becoming a member today. And like I mentioned, not only are we hosting an education retreat, but you can also vote for 2023 green building topics you would like to see in the upcoming new year of 2023. And you can vote for those education topics. There's a vote button right on our main page at ecobuilding.org, which I'll also post in the chat. I just wanted to bring this up to show everyone that it's available there on our homepage. Awesome, and that leads me to one of my favorite parts of events is thanking our sponsors. I'd like to thank tonight's sponsor, Pathway Design and Construction, which is a Seattle-based full-service remodeling company that specializes in highly aesthetic, eco-friendly, and custom designs. By focusing on comfort solutions to accommodate homeowners' individuality, the Pathway team is able to create beautiful and functional designs that are built to last. Paul Kucharhook, owner of Pathway, understands the repercussions of using chemical-based materials in construction and its effects on our health and the built environment. Many homeowners are unaware of the harmful effects certain building materials can have on homes' occupants, something we'll be discussing today. This is why Pathway has strong values around this topic and it is their mission to promote wellness into each remodel project. It is their standard to consciously select clean, eco-friendly materials for each project while having protocols in place to leave each remodel healthier and more efficient. Also, the Pathway team is hiring, so if you're interested in joining Pathway team, you can ask them directly and contact them. I'll post their website in the chat. Thank you again so much, Pathway, for your sponsorship of tonight's event. Our next sponsor is Mighty Energy Solutions. Mighty Energy Solution has been powering our spaces inexorably toward electrification and away from combustion fuels like natural gas. More and more municipalities are adopting building codes designed to expedite this transition. Seattle, for example, has moved to the forefront of large cities in this respect by adopting new code that bans gas heating for new single-family and multifamily projects. This means that heat pumps and far-infrared radiant heat, either in combination or on their own, are the only efficient solutions available that comply with new standards and codes. So especially since so much of Washington's electricity comes from hydropower, this new proactive code promotes a far healthier indoor air quality for all these new projects, as well as decarbonizing a sector that remains a large contributor to our overall carbon footprint. I highly recommend checking out Mighty Energy Solutions infrared heat products. They're a wonderful sponsor of multiple Northwest Eco Building Guild events, and we're super excited to have them on tonight. Thank you, Mighty Energy. And lastly, Green County Tools. The Green Tools program is designed to help all King County stakeholders green their built environment while addressing critical environmental issues such as global warming, habitat restoration, solid waste reduction, and community planning. Green Tools provides technical assistance and hands-on training and policy development through community partnerships in public and private sectors. If you want to learn more, check out greentools.us. They're a fantastic sponsor. Thank you so much. And their website serves as a resource for all kinds of green building information, ranging from case studies to technical references. So I welcome you all to check it out, and I'll post that in the chat. So thank you so much. Another huge thank you to our sponsors. We are so grateful for your involvement and the ability to make these events happen. Awesome. So before I begin with our first speakers, we partnered with the International Living Future Institute, and they provided us some awesome videos in regards to tonight's event. In particular, they'll be showing a video on the Declare label. That is a platform to share and find healthy building products. So we're excited. We partnered with the International Living Future Institute, and they provided us 2 videos for tonight's event and topic for us to show prior to introducing our live speakers. So I'll be showing 2 videos. I'm going to stop share and reshare here real quick. And yeah, we have a welcome statement from, excuse me. We have a welcome statement from ILSI, and then I will show another video. Alrighty, go ahead and share my screen, optimize for video clip. And share. Sorry about that. And there we go. I'm embarrassed. I'm showing the wrong video. I apologize. Just one moment. There we go. Here's information regarding their Declare program. If you experience any technical difficulties, just let me know, and let me know if you can't hear the audio. But yes, thank you again so much, International Living Future Institute, for showing their Declare label. that video to ILFI. That was fantastic. Awesome. Go ahead and stop share and reshare. Yeah, so I welcome everyone. I'm going to post their website in the chat. The Declare label is really neat and unique in that it helps provide an accessible database used by leading designers, real estate owners, and conscientious homeowners to specify products that they know they can trust. So I welcome you all. And if you are a vendor, look into getting the Declare label. It's a fantastic resource used by many developers, builders, hoping to meet material resources and healthy indoor air quality requirements. So please visit ILFI's awesome program, Declare. I'll post that in the chat. Thanks again, ILFI, for that great video. Awesome, and that leads me to introducing our speakers for tonight. We have two really wonderful speakers. I'm excited to introduce Lucas Johnson. He's a chief building nerd at Valley Homes. Lucas holds a degree in physiochemical biology, environmental science, and green business management. He has contributed as a scientist builder, utility program manager, and materials supplier to deliver over 10,000 high-performance building projects, ranging from deep energy retrofits of large commercial buildings to net zero passive houses built with natural materials. He began his work to reduce our collective carbon footprint, but now focuses equally on resilience to a changing climate while pushing for the right to comfortable, healthy, and affordable homes as a core element of social justice. And not only is he a speaker for tonight, he's also a Northwest Eco Building Guild board member. So we're really excited and happy to have Lucas on. And following Lucas, as well as paying attention and answering questions in the chat, is Aaron Sauerhoff. He's the founder and CEO of Earth Homes. As a seasoned practitioner of natural building, Aaron Sauerhoff cares very deeply about form, function, and health of our built environment. After years of leading teams, Aaron now serves a wide variety of clientele, bringing forth their green visions from conception to reality. He can be hired as an addition to an existing team to serve a range of functions, such as building science consulting, building information modeling and drafting, or serve clients directly as a client representative, project manager, and architectural designer. His life purpose is to reverse climate change and sees the process of building as a key opportunity to make that happen. Welcome, Aaron. Welcome, Lucas. And thank you all for participating. I'm going to give the floor now to our speakers. Welcome. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, much appreciated. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and get started here. I'm going to do a presentation and Aaron's going to follow with some examples of projects. One that he and I have been working on, I believe we're going to look at, and a couple other projects he's worked on in the past. And then we'll have hopefully a stimulating question and answer session after all that. So let's get going. All right. So I do appreciate that conversation with Kathy earlier about the non-toxic thing. I'll get into that in a minute. I already have a slide actually addressing that concept. So I titled this Making Healthy Choices. Health is a lot more aspirational than non-toxic. Non-toxic is the lack of something bad rather than the inclusion of something good. So I think it's important to reframe this in a sense as making healthy choices rather than avoiding non-toxic stuff. So who is Valley? We're building scientists. We do development work as applied research. This is a project we're doing right now in Phoenix that I'll show some case study examples of later. Some of the pretty extreme measures we've taken to make it as healthy as possible. We consider ourselves good building activists, so trying to use buildings as a way to address the climate crisis. We are concerned parents. We both have 2 young kids and are quite concerned about the future. We love exploring the great outdoors, and I call us stoic-ish leaders. We try really hard to be stoic, but the recent times, I think we've all taken a few lumps and, you know, understand getting stressed out at times, but trying not to make decisions from a place of stress, but trying to make them from a place of love for the people who we're working with to develop these buildings. So Austin Trauman, he's my business partner, the founder of Valley Homes, based in Phoenix. I'm based in Tucson, Arizona. You can see my house I'm speaking to you from behind me in the little video window here. And I'm Lucas Johnson, Chief Building Nerd, and also a board member at the Eco Building Guild. So unfortunately, toxic materials are really popular. They're specified all the time. And it seems like there's almost an intentional ignorance to looking at what materials contain inside of them in terms of ingredients, right? So that's a critical step we need to take. For instance, insulation, my arch enemy, spray foam, can be very toxic. It is made up of some of the more toxic chemicals out there: MDI, aniline, formaldehyde, hydrochloric acid, and phosgene. Phosgene is a chemical weapon used during World War I, given low-grade chemical weapon, but pretty wild that an insulation product has a former chemical weapon inside of it. And then part B doesn't get any better. The second, the two parts that you mix together for two-part spray foam. And it's also exceptionally high in terms of global warming impact of blowing agents and all this other stuff. So unacceptable on money levels, but toxicity may be number one. A great thing that you just heard about is the red list. The red list is a group of chemicals that are known to have negative human health interactions. The red list is updated every few years, and it is kind of the epicenter of what you should look at in terms of chemicals to avoid in materials. Now, they can't always be avoided, and some alcohol recently got put on the red list, for instance, and that is VOC. It can be bad for us, but you just got to start with the list and use that as the beginning of the decision, but also use context in what you're building and what the chemical actually is to refine that decision. When there's a lot of red list chemicals in buildings, we end up very often with something called sick building syndrome, right? It's where people are effectively experiencing light flu, heavy cold symptoms inside a given building, oftentimes a workplace, sometimes their own home. And it's been considered actually a major global medical issue. Looking into this a bit more, I didn't realize there are quite a few doctors out there, quite a bit of research in terms of this subject. And it'd be very interesting, I think, to get the medical field and the building science field together to discuss these things, because a lot of the problems are eminently solvable. The saying that I like to use, if you've heard me speak before, you've heard me say this: the ingredients create the results. There's no emergent magical property of design where you can design out all the impacts that are built into the product, from carbon to toxicity to social justice issues. If that's happened in the product life cycle before it reaches your job site, you can't control that. It's part of the product. The image that Havelock Wool uses to summarize this, I think, is really wonderful. If your fibers are produced through a cycle of, warfare, big chemical production, et cetera, exposing people all along the product life cycle to toxic chemicals, probably not the most wonderful result of something as in terms of a product that you put in your house. If the product comes from natural evolutionary cycles that have occurred over eons, with well-treated animals, well-managed forests, whatever it might be, if the raw products can come from a natural source, it can really change the game in terms of toxicity. This is a pretty comprehensive materials review. I put it more here so that you can come find it later. You can email me or follow up with me afterwards, and I can get you a copy of this, the PDF of the presentation, or there's going to be a recording available on YouTube, on our Eco Building YouTube channel. So yeah, kind of worst of the worst worth highlighting is closed cell spray foam and open cell spray foam as far as insulations are concerned. And then there's some amazing, quote unquote, non-toxic, as we'll get into in a second. I'd like to call them healthy or good choices down at the bottom of the screen here. You can go through that same process for membranes and barriers. You can go through that same process for connections, sheathing, and you could extend this analysis. It's a great way to kind of break these things out and visually decipher what is okay and what is not for a given project. So is this about materials only, or is it about much more than materials? Is it about the emergent properties that come from putting materials together in a really good way? And as if you were here early, Kathy was bringing up a really wonderful point about Non-toxic A being a colloquialism, it's something we say all the time, but it may not actually exist. Even the healthiest materials can have, trigger allergies in some people, like Havelock wool insulation. Some people have wool allergies, right? Well, then it's not really non-toxic for them in a sense, right? Not good for their health. So that's why the non-toxic thing is not that great of a way to describe things in my mind. That's, again, the lack of something bad. And I think we should be supporting the inclusion of something good. So I think it's better to talk about this as good or healthy building, however you want to frame it. So healthy building requires good materials combined with good design. To summarize what's unhealthy, from my kind of building nerd standpoint, things being too hot or too cold can cause all kinds of issues. With mold, when it's too dry and too hot, or too dry and too cold, you can get a lot of viral issues. If it's too hot and too wet, you can get all kinds of bacterial issues, fungal issues. Toxic chemicals being included in materials, or toxic kind of chemicals being emitted from certain things like mold, particulate matter that may exist in the air from everything from volatilizing dust when you start cooking to wildfire smoke to whatever it may be. As I mentioned, mold, EMFs, this is something that's not as addressed as it should be. This is electromagnetic forces. There's a lot of negative health issues that can occur from improperly wiring your electrical system, for instance. Natural gas, all the research that's out there at this point indicates that natural gas is not good for our health and really should not be in our buildings, much less it's kind of like a way to continue our addiction to fossil fuels by being less bad instead of making a real change to being all electric. But from a health standpoint, natural gas is consistently considered to be very bad. And then pests and rodents, that's another big issue. And this isn't a comprehensive list of everything, but this would be a pretty darn good start if you could basically get rid of these issues. Oh, and untreated water coming into the house, forgot about that one. So as I've been alluding to, health takes a lot more than just avoiding bad ingredients, right? It's not the lack of unhealthy. It takes combining good ingredients in a good way to create real health. An example would be optimizing indoor air quality through, including non-toxic finishes, furnishings, cleaning, good maintenance, along with continuous heat recovery, mechanical ventilation, maybe even some spot ventilation in the mix too, as we'll talk about in a minute. Also, we want enclosure systems that avoid toxic ingredients and ideally are made of ingredients that actually improve our health. And really critically, all enclosure systems need to dry faster than they get wet so that they can avoid water accumulation, because water accumulation is inevitably going to lead to a lot of bad things, most likely mold. So properly wiring electrical systems and dealing with supply water filtration, also a really important thing to do. There's some really good stuff you can do there, but I feel like there's a lot more research and a lot of steps that can be taken in both those areas still. And really overall, fundamentally, this is about caring deeply about the people involved with your own design and construction team, your subcontractors, the clients themselves, the people who make the materials. Building should be about creating joy, creating healthy lifestyles, and that should extend way beyond just the clients. It should extend to everyone who's involved with that building. You can find a lot of stuff out there when you look, Google healthy building or whatever. I really liked this conclusion that they came to with these 9 foundations of a healthy building: air quality, thermal health, moisture, dust and pests, safety and security, water quality, noise. Maybe you can hear my kids yelling in the background. They just got back from capoeira. Noise and interior wall insulation, something I definitely need to do in my own house here. So my building's like kind of healthy, but maybe it's not all the way there. Lighting and views and ventilation systems. I do have my door open right now. If my forehead's a little shiny, it's because it's about 85 degrees here down in Tucson. But I wanted some fresh air because my air quality in here was not very good. So how do we as in Valley Homes, and also in our collaboration with Aaron, we've been doing a lot of this work recently. So just thinking about that, how when we're working on our own projects, how do we design for health, right? And we like to say good design requires selecting good products. So it often starts there. This is a sandwich I made recently. I bring it up because I'm not a great cook, but I can make really good food because I use the right ingredients. And when I occasionally put them together in a really good way, it is almost magical what can be created. But you always have to start with the good ingredients. You can never take bad ingredients and somehow make it a good meal. It's ridiculous to assume we can take bad ingredients and make them a good building. So one of the most powerful shifts we've had recently is we've been emphasizing starting with a do not use list rather than a whole extensive list of things that we all agree are good and would like to have. So often the success of a project actually really relies upon eliminating a few select things, even more so than including a few select things. There's often a few good options that can work, but if there's also on the other side of things, a few bad choices that are going to ruin the whole point of a project, right? So for us in our analysis and our work, some of those examples are any type of spray foam, with very rare examples. Sometimes as a roofing product in Arizona, there can be some arguments, and it actually is lower carbon than like metal in some scenarios. So there's always exceptions to every rule, right? But in general, spray foam is on our do not use list. Rigid foam boards, because they aren't vapor permeable, which can lead to moisture accumulation and mold. Fiberglass tends to be treated with a lot of fire retardants that are not good for our health. Natural gas, toxic glues, so that takes out a lot of potential materials. And sometimes it's worth using the right LVL or something like that, and hopefully you can find one with red list free glue or something like that. But in general, toxic glues are really important to avoid. And then high VOC paints and finishes. Those are also obviously things that people talk about all the time. It's kind of the icing on the cake. The other stuff probably matters a lot more. So then once you've created your do not use list, then you start specifying good materials, healthy materials, not just non-toxic, but materials that actually encourage a healthy building, right? So as I mentioned, we want to consider the health of the manufacturers, the installers, and the occupants of the building. And we want to ask questions, right? First, is it durable in my climate, right? If it's a good material, but it doesn't work for your climate, probably shouldn't use it. It's not going to be a good building. Will it dry in my climate? Very important question, basically the same thing, but more about, is it going to make drying an issue in the building versus is the material itself durable? Is it healthy for the planet? And will it provide comfort or joy in my experience of living in this building, right? Those are all really, really important considerations. It's also about having a good process, right? So planning and testing is something that we do extensively. This is a wall sample of our Muse project, the 4-unit project we're doing in Phoenix, where we are taking good materials that have been proven for decades in cold climates, but haven't necessarily tried to live through Phoenix summers, and saw what happens, right? There's an intense amount of heat, of UV, and then also water during the monsoon season. So it's a really, really good time to try to destroy materials and see what happens. As you can see in this image here, if your people screen isn't blocking your view here, you can see that the membrane that we used, called it Hero, when we peeled it back, the plywood underneath was in effectively new mint condition. The plywood outside of the membrane had nearly degraded to dust. It was really, really crazy to see that dramatic of a distinction, that dramatic of a line. And then what we noticed too is these top edges of the Gutex, the wood fiber insulation that you can see my hand pinching there in the photo, had gotten quite wet and swelled a bit over time, right? That's not necessarily a good thing. So what we decided in the end is that every time Gutex was going to interface with an open space, top of the wall, bottom of the wall, rough openings of windows, that we were going to treat it with a liquid applied yet vapor permeable airtight waterproofing material called Viscon, so that the ends of the boards would stay dry and not become moldy, right? Like, what's the point of using a good healthy material if it doesn't stay a good healthy material over time? We also do a lot of extensive planning for how we're going to put down certain membranes that we use. This is for a subslab vapor barrier that we used called Pango. Termites are a huge issue down here in the Southwest, and you often have to do extremely toxic and temporary termite treatments for your below grade treatment, and along with standard vapor barrier. But if you use this Pango material, this little black material that you can see, we tested extensively to see what tapes would stick to it. This was south facing and the Phoenix sun fully exposed, see what would last better. All of these are red list free tape options that we were trying with this material, which is also red list free. And the idea there is that we got rid of any sort of toxicity in the soil system, the foundation system. And the termite treatment would have to be repeated every about 5 years. This Pango membrane should last for the lifetime of the building, which we anticipate to be well over 100 years. So one of the messages is be good, be healthy from the ground up. This is the Pango membrane laid down over the foundations of the 4 buildings. So the key components were this Stego Pango membrane, which was used to avoid highly toxic and temporary termite treatments, as I was just talking about. And then the Proclima Compigo tape and Viscon liquid applied were the red list free products that we used for detailing. You can see the tape on the left around the foundation bolt and around the drain there. And then you can see the liquid applied right after it was sprayed on over the Compigo tape to make sure we had a really, really durable seal at that level, so we don't have water seeping up into our building. Because again, one of the key things of healthy building is keeping water out of the building or allowing the building to dry sufficiently and not get wet enough to cause issues. So the next step, once you have your foundation system down, is you need to make sure you invest in good framing, healthy framing, which is FSC wood, no toxic glues, no pressure treated lumber, and again, keeping it dry. You'll see some of these messages I repeat many times in this presentation, keeping it dry being one of the main ones. So if you use a material below your sill plate to separate it from the stem wall or the slab, depending on if you're monopore, stem on, stem and footer kind of foundation, you're not only creating a capillary break and an air seal, but the code says that since it's now separated from the potential rising water through the concrete, that you don't have to use pressure treated for your base plates. You can use normal lumber, which can save budget, decrease toxicity, can be a really nice thing to do. And a lot of us are putting an air sealing gasket or a capillary break gasket or both below our sill plates anyway, or our base plates anyway, and not using or still using pressure treated, which is kind of pointless, right? So we can avoid the pressure treated, decrease toxicity, and actually have a better building system by making sure we do that. So this is what it could look like in the real world. This white tape is something that as a vapor open tape that was used to air seal from the plywood sheathing to the tape that continued under the base plate. So that allowed a airtight, waterproof, yet vapor permeable connection at the plywood level, while also allowing us to avoid using pressure treated lumber. So we like to say no PT, red list free, right? That's what we're trying to do, is do all of these critical control layers in a building with red list free materials. So even the best ingredients aren't perfect. We use 3/4 plywood for structural reasons to make our exterior insulation batten system and heavy stucco cladding work. We needed to use very beefy plywood, and we got it from a really good lumber yard, but due to monsoon weather and such, some of the sheets did end up with some mold on them. So we had to remove those sheets and, put in new ones, because we don't want to be adding mold into the beginning, the building from the very beginning, right? We also did some basic treatments to some areas, but yeah, everything that was moldy was removed, returned, and replaced with plywood without mold. And the lumberyard was actually really cool with working with us on that. A lot of them will kind of take the blame for having sent you moldy lumber and will help you make sure not to poison the future occupants. So just ask nicely. Hopefully it works. Another thing is that good ingredients need good protection, right? Especially around rough openings. There's a quote about that Joe Strieberg said once about how I could make amazing buildings if they didn't have to have windows or people, right? Those are the two things that really tend to stress the durability of the building. And windows tend to be a very common failure point that water enters at. And again, if water enters and does not exit, then we can create all kinds of major health issues inside the building. So we ended up with buildings that look like giant blue Smurfs. Every square millimeter of plywood was covered with a peel and stick membrane that's airtight, waterproof, et cetera, vapor open, but also red list free, right? So we were able to achieve extremely high levels of performance. These units are all lower than passive house as far as airtightness is concerned, but we did it entirely with red list free materials. On the note of even the best ingredients aren't perfect, one thing that we think about often is managing formaldehyde from wood products. Almost all wood products have naturally occurring formaldehyde that's going to be released at some point. The Havelock wool insulation has a property of being able to irreversibly bind formaldehyde. So having a bunch of wool around all your wood framing should reduce potential formaldehyde exposure. We'd love to do some formal research on that, but you know, that's hard to make happen. But maybe soon we'll try to make that happen. So keeping structural materials sufficiently dry over time, obviously mission critical, one of those things I'm going to keep repeating. Some data, wood should be about 15% moisture content or less before covering. That's your sheathing, your framing, et cetera. And remember that everything will get wet at some point somehow. So allowing it to dry is very, very, very important. Moving into good insulation. So now we're framed up. What are we going to do to insulate the building? What are we going to do to not just be non-toxic, but to make it healthy, to add another degree of comfort, right? So we need to use healthy, vapor permeable, low carbon, and durable insulation options. This is going to be some of the ones that we love. One of the big questions we always ask again and again and again is, what are the ingredients, right? And in terms of insulation, an analogy we like to think about is, if it were a jacket, would you wear it, right? Because you're going to be living literally inside of it. It's like having a jacket with a hood that's slightly looser around you. Or is this a tent that you would go live in, right? It's just bigger space and you don't see the insulation because it's covered by finishes. But would you actually want to be surrounded in a bubble of foam insulation? Me, no, I really would not. So for exterior insulation, wood fiber products are wonderful. Some of them are actually not great, so be careful with what you select. This is Gutex, a product that I used to sell when I worked at 475, so I have a ton of experience using this now as a builder as well. And developer on our own projects. We really enjoy this product. There's some other good ones out there. We're really excited by this Timber HP by GoLab that's supposed to be coming out in 2023 in a loose fill, bat, and an exterior board product that would be made in Maine, so it's made in America, and really well funded. So hopefully they they create a product that is as good as their marketing is so far. Exterior insulation, cork is another option we absolutely love. There's some really regenerative and interesting things about cork and the cyclical economy that it's created in Portugal and all that stuff. So it is a really neat product that we would love to keep using more of. One of the cool advantages is it can be used as both your cladding and your exterior insulation. So it can kind of be an all-in-one situation. That's kind of a tough sell for a lot of clients, but for the right client, it could be a really, really good option. Interior insulations that are healthy that we love. Wool insulation, again, is one we really like. There's also loose fill and bats available. Straw insulation, I'm calling this interior, even though it expands interior to exterior, but it kind of takes the place of your cavity insulation. So in my mind, I'm considering it interior insulation. Wood, as I've mentioned, wonderful product for interior insulations and exterior. Hemp bats, hemp wool bats are also a really great interior insulation product. And then exterior insulation, hempcrete is an amazing product as well that we should certainly start using more of. One of the cool things about hempcrete is it actually sequesters CO2. All these other materials generally are carbon storing, which means that they hold the carbon that the net carbon they've absorbed throughout their life cycle up until they're installed is stored until the product is removed. But it's storage. It's by nature somewhat temporary. Sequestration requires a phase change and a permanent change and permanent fixation into something. So hempcrete's really neat in that it actively draws carbon dioxide from the air when it's curing and turns that into a carbonate structure. So it captures, it really sequesters that carbon. So it's a really, really neat product. And obviously, hempcrete type products are not going to have many issues with mold. They're not going to have many issues with fire, other things like that that can influence your health. For gap insulation, so around windows, between your sheathing and your plywood bucks, if you have them for your exterior insulation or whatever, which you can see here, we found that the loose fill wool is just such a killer app because it's so easy to stuff. It's R4.3 per inch. It's as far as water management is concerned, it's the best option out there. And as far as health's concerned, unless you're allergic to wool, it's one of the healthiest options out there as well. So we've had a lot of success stuffing wool into every random cavity around the building. And then of course, when you can, covering it up with an airtight vapor open material, like the tape you can see in the lower left-hand corner down there. So once you've done your insulation, you need to then have healthy or good air and water control. So using non-toxic, I know that's a word, it's not really a thing in reality, but it's such a colloquialism, it's hard to avoid using. So non-toxic, vapor permeable, and durable ingredients, right? And I put the smokestack down here for my air symbol because one thing to remember is that exterior air is not always good. And especially down here in the Southwest, the exterior ambient air quality is often not good at all. So opening doors and windows when it's hot out with bad air quality is not a ventilation option. It's not going to improve your air quality. So then what do you do? So for our air and water control, we need to require red list free materials. They're readily available from membranes, tapes, liquid applied aerosol sealants, adhesives, vapor barriers. Many of them have a declare label. Many of them are just red list free when you actually look into what they're made out of. But just ask the questions, try to figure out what the ingredients are in these materials you're specifying and try to avoid anything on the red list. Some examples of what we've done in projects for exterior and interior membranes. These are durably airtight yet vapor permeable for the exterior membrane and actually vapor variable for the interior side. So it blocks moisture at the right time and allows breathing at the right time. I won't go into the details of that right now because it's pretty complex, but a very key point is wool is the only insulation that we actually leave exposed because it's really good at managing water, right? And it can help absorb ambient water vapor floating around the building onto the surface so that that water vapor doesn't get to the sheathing, hit something colder and maybe condense, create potential mold issues. It can help modulate humidity inside buildings. And in the desert, we often are dealing with really dry indoor air. So our hope is that the wool can help absorb extra humidity that's created while cooking, showering, whatever it might be, and then re-release that moisture back into the building when it's getting drier. Red list free PSA is pressurized solid acrylic or pressure sensitive adhesive. Can mean both. So it's kind of confusing, but red list free PSA tape can control air and water for 100 years. So oftentimes you'll see caulking around windows. Most of the caulking products are not very healthy and most of them are very failure prone. There's differential movement between something like a window frame and wood framing. So inevitably, as those materials move differently over time, you're going to shear the caulking and have leaks that can then lead to mold accumulation, ambient air getting in during wildfires, whatever it might be. Tapes are a much more durable option. And they can be used for everything from wood framing to straw bale buildings, interiors, exteriors. I would highly recommend taking that approach for a durability and a toxicity reasons. Then once you've done, your proper foundation, your proper framing, your proper insulation, your proper water control and air control. Now we need to make sure we have good ventilation. It's the lungs of our building, right? And that ventilation needs to have efficient motors, high quality filters, and heat recovery. If it doesn't have heat recovery, we can have the too hot, too cold issues, right? Or the too wet, too dry issues, neither of which are good for health. So heat recovery is a critical part of any sort of continuous ventilation system. Another thing that I throw in the ventilation category is ventilated cladding. This is our Muse project before the stucco goes over this. We did a full 2x4 ventilation cavity because we have 2 stories straight up. So you actually need about 1.5 inch ventilation cavity to be able to have airflow across that long of a channel. If you have a multi-story building, you're going to need more than 3/4 inch or whatever has been specified. And from a rodents and pest standpoint, it's really important that we protect the bottom of these battens from rodents and pests getting in there, from potential, if they're in a wildfire area, from embers getting into this area, and then also from splashback from water. You can see the black liquid applied material over the bottom of the Gutex that's also protecting the bottom edge. If I'm going to be super picky, I can see one spot that they kind of missed. We went around the building and actually had them peel back this metal kick flashing so that they could touch up the bottom of the board of the Gutex sufficiently so that it is actually waterproof and doesn't bring water into the building. So once you have set yourself up for success, one of the really important things to do is use data to validate that success, right? So you need to be monitoring. I forgot to put the it's monitor UEIQ, more of a command, I guess. So Kytera is a great option. We've had success with that. It's a really neat system. It's quite accurate. It has replaceable sensors. It is a bit complex and a bit expensive, so it maybe isn't for everyone. It's maybe more for the building nerds amongst us. At my own house, I actually have an Aware device, and it's an easier option. It's less expensive. It's super easy to set up. Has a nice app that goes with it and stuff. And it's somewhat accurate. The sensor, you can send it in for them to clean the sensors, but the sensors in the first place aren't the highest end sensors. But how precise do you really need your data to be? It's really more about noticing trends and helping create better behavior inside your house to have a healthier life, to create better air quality. So the big question is, what should you monitor, right? The Aware system kind of does the big 5, right? Which are temperature, humidity, CO2, chemicals, which is a pretty broad category, and PM 2.5, which is like the particulate matter scale that is of most concern commonly. So that's what they're measuring. And it'll give you trends over time. This is showing the Aware score, which is their averaging through an algorithm of the big 5 factors here: the temperature, the humidity, the CO2, the chemicals, the PM 2.5. They average that into a weighted score out of 100. And it shows, in the upper left-hand corner there, our weekly average was 76.5. Not horrible, but not that great. But you can see that there's also a huge amount of variability where it can get up to almost 90 or down all the way to 62.6 on average. And you can also click over on all of these different categories, temperature, humidity, et cetera, and see how those changed throughout the week. I'll show you an example of that on this next slide, actually. So, or actually, it's the following slide, I apologize. So because there's such great degree of variation of both indoor and outdoor air quality, what we really need is continuous fresh air ventilation with really good filters that runs 24/7 to introduce fresh air and exhaust stale air from the building. That is, unless there's wildfire smoke, where most systems should actually be turned off and you should rely on an in-room plug-in filter. Because the filter systems for these whole house systems don't tend to have the type of filters required for wildfire smoke. And those are really not even that available at a residential level anyhow. Continuous ventilation also does stuff like helps reduce the risk of radon exposure if you happen to be building in a zone where that's a big issue. Minimizes the risk of moisture failures such as mold because it helps balance humidity inside the building. Ideally, they should have a heat recovery of over 85%, because again, being too hot or too cold is a big part of being unhealthy. The ductwork, if any, must be air sealed and well insulated, so you're not pulling in a bunch of pollutants to the system, and you're not having that 85% heat recovery dramatically drop because you have ductwork running through uninsulated space. And you should also have MERV 13 filtration at minimum. MERV 14 or 15 is ideal if possible and affordable. And specialized filters such as activated charcoal may be needed for these systems as well. There's two main options of continuous ventilation, ductless or ducted. The Luno system is my favorite ductless, and the Zender is my favorite ducted system. We've also had some success with Panasonic systems in some of our projects down here in Arizona. So going back to this aware score situation here, if you look at the graph at the bottom of this slide, this is that same week where I had shown you the aware score over time. Part of the reason the aware score wasn't that great is you can see that the chemical levels were going, kind of off the charts here. And spot ventilation is not a good way to do continuous ventilation, like running a bath fan on continuous, a kitchen hood on continuous. Exhaust only is going to pull in a bunch of stuff to your house that you probably don't want in your house. So that's really bad for air quality. But spot ventilation can be a really nice icing on the cake when your continuous ventilation system needs a little extra help to deal with a spike in air quality issues, right? So in this case, we were cleaning the house. So there was some chemicals flying around and it was really hot outside. So everything was buttoned up and we weren't getting fresh air into the house. So running a bath fan can help exhaust some of that chemical concentration that had kind of an instantaneous spike at that moment. Or this is when I believe I burnt some meatloaf or something, some like turkey meatloaf I was trying to learn how to make. And we had a massive spike in chemicals from the burning in the oven. So a kitchen hood would be a really great thing to turn on to then get rid of that spike of chemicals, right? So in other words, continuous ventilation comes first, but spot ventilation can be useful in an addition. Do not confuse those two things. Spot ventilation should not be used as continuous ventilation. Continuous ventilation should be balanced with heat recovery. Spot ventilation is exhaust only. So one of the things I use in my own house actually is this B-cell plug-in filter for some of the reasons I mentioned earlier, right? We don't have a whole house ERV, a whole house continuous ventilation system yet in this house. We're trying to get one installed as soon as possible. But because it's often very hot out, we have the doors closed. The air quality outside's kind of bad. Air quality inside's not that wonderful. What can you do at that point? Or let's say you're in wildfire conditions like a lot of the Northwest is, a plug-in interior filter is a really good idea. It basically just sucks air in through the front of it and blows it out through the back of it. And as that air flows through, it goes through a series of filters, usually a MERV 14 plus filter along with an activated charcoal filter. One of the things to really think about is that filter durability and cost. How long do those last and how much they cost to replace? And then also the main thing might be not annoying as far as the criteria for buying one. I did buy this B-cell one. It's a bit noisy. I kind of regret it. I wish I'd spent more on the one my business partner told me to get, that he has this Miele system. And there's a lot of them out there now, a lot from the big brands like Panasonic, and then there's a lot of smaller kind of startup brands like Miele. This one is really, truly awesome, but it is like $600. This one, the B-cell, was like $300. So I ended up going with the less expensive one to try it out. It's quite noisy. It's kind of big, and the aesthetic's okay. Kind of like it, but it's again, it's kind of big, and it is noisy enough that no one in my family likes it. And maybe if you take one thing away from all of this tonight is change your frickin' filters. It is such an important and missed step. This is the filter that came out of a system at my house after we got back from 3 months away, and the house sitters that we had did a wonderful job with everything, but did not understand how bad not changing a filter can be for an air conditioning system. And we almost had the whole system fall apart. And obviously you do not want to be sucking air in through this. This had started like molding on one side. It was really bad news, right? So we had to clean the whole system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Your systems that are there for your health require filters that are working in order to be worth doing. So change your filters. I'm going to say it a few more times today too. Good electrical, limiting EMFs and electrification are often missteps. I'm not going to go into too much detail on these because again, this is an area where I'm really starting to, expand my expertise. Some of the strategies that I found for healthy electrical systems is distance is your best friend from major EMF sources. Don't locate major appliances or solar inverters within, say, 10 feet of a bed. And when I took a Gauss meter around many years ago and measured a lot of stuff like smart meters, microwaves, solar inverters, et cetera, a Gauss meter is something that measures electromagnetic forces. That whole like old wives' tale of microwaves being dangerous within 2 feet, it's actually probably true. There's a pretty scary level of EMF when you're within 2 feet of an operating microwave. If you're 4 feet away, there's basically no measurable radiation. The EMFs degrade exponentially over distance. So again, distance is your best friend. Collect data. So if you can, get access to a Gauss meter and go and measure these things. When they're plugged in and operating, see what you actually measured off of them. And there's a whole group of kind of subcategory of building science, of building biologists who really focus on this kind of stuff, especially around EMFs and material health and those kind of things. Locating the main panel away from occupants and operating most of the house off a sub panel can be a really good idea. You want to avoid grounding electrical into your slab or your foundation system. And one of the things I did not know, this one kind of blew my mind, is the video I watched was probably the nerdiest, most 1980s video I've ever seen. But it was very fascinating in the subject matter about how so many buildings have improperly wired neutrals. And if we don't keep the neutral and the hot adjacent to each other, physically adjacent to each other, they're supposed to cancel out the EMFs of each other, right? So if you separate your hot and your neutral splits off on a different loop or something like that, that separation actually causes issues and that create EMF output. So one very common example is when wires are coming together, a junction box, and you have all the neutrals put together, but then oftentimes you have the two hots split like this, and if wiring like this, it will cause both backflow and also cause EMF issues. And code does actually require wiring like this. The problem is this often doesn't get caught because the lights will still turn on, everything will still work. But if you measure with a Gauss meter or measure the flow on one of the wires, one of the lines, you can have some pretty scary situations. Good water, right? Now that we've dealt with some of the core systems of the building, we're kind of down to the plumbing level, right? We talked electrical, we've talked mechanical systems, we talked enclosure systems, now it's the water systems, right? Water is a core ingredient of life, but the quality ranges dramatically. In Seattle, where many of you are attending from, and the Northwest in general, a lot of the water quality there is really good, right? In Seattle, the water tends to be very soft, which can be very corrosive to pipes and stuff like that. We have the polar opposite problem here in Tucson, where the water is exceptionally hard and creates a lot of scale and issues like that, right? So down here in the Southwest, we end up with whole house filtration systems in almost every new building built, where some major filtration goals like water softening are achieved at the whole house level at the main supply in. And again, these systems don't work unless you change your filters. So change your filters. And there's also options available at fixtures, right? So let's say you can't figure out physically or financially how to do the whole house option, then you can also have some options at the fixtures. And sometimes you do these in combination. You do the whole house water softening at the whole house level, and then you do another filter at the faucets or something to capture other things that could be in the water, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, whatever it might be that you're concerned about, metallic particles, whatever. So Aquasana is one of the main brands out there. They generally have pretty good quality products, but there's a lot of kind of neater, newer stuff coming out. Our favorite story is that the Body Glove company that are famous for wetsuits, apparently their founder felt quite bad about the environmental impact of wetsuits and wanted to help solve water. So invested almost all of his fortune into coming up with these Body Glove water filters, which are actually spectacular. And it's what we're using in our own project. Whole house water softening, but then at all the fixtures, there's a water filter that is a smaller filter that can be more easily replaced, et cetera, and filters out quite a bit more than just doing the softening. So now we've handled water. And again, these are surface level because this is an hour presentation, but now that we've addressed water, we need to have some good final touches. So that can be clay plaster to non-toxic or healthy floor systems to our maintenance efforts, right? So healthy flooring, real wood floors, really nice option, quite expensive though. Cork floors, I'm standing on one right now that my buddies at Green Home Solutions sold me. And they're a wonderful option. Saltillo tile is what we're about to put into our house for the rest of the house other than my office that has the cork floor. And then marmoleum, we've used that in our bathrooms and it's an absolutely amazing material. We don't have a super fancy house, as you can tell from it being the 1,200 square feet of solar panel glory behind me with original 1953 single pane windows. And you know, it feels like you're stepping into a multi-million-dollar mansion when you step on this marmoleum floor in the bathroom. It really is an amazing material, and it's probably the healthiest material you could put down as flooring for a bathroom. So really nice combo there. And earthen floors are awesome. I need to learn how to execute these. I don't know, maybe Aaron will provide some examples. Healthy finishes, finished plywood. It's a pretty common option. I see Aaron gave a thumbs up there for the earthen floors, love it. Clay plaster is a wonderful option. If you're gonna use paint, try to use zero VOC paints. And then also really consider the VOCs of the furniture and everything else you're putting in there, cabinets, whatever it might be. You don't wanna create this, you know, awesome thing that you've invested all this time and money into and then fill it with a bunch of furniture that's emitting formaldehyde and other gross chemicals. And then also cleaning is necessary. I have to tell myself that every day. And I must clean up now. And it does make cleaning a little less painful when you're using healthy materials because you don't get a headache afterwards, things smell nice. So green cleaning materials are extremely important as part of your healthy building maintenance plan. So lower zero VOC cleaning supplies, looking for natural ingredients, avoiding scents. Scents can often be just labeled as perfume or added scent, and it can be 100 different chemicals, but the manufacturers have argued that they are trade secrets that they don't need to disclose the mix of, so they can hide a ton of chemicals in perfumes. So be really, really, really careful of added scents. Another habit is spend less time inside. If it's good air quality outside and you don't have the greatest air quality inside, try to find a time when the air quality is good outside. Today, I took my dog for a walk right after a monsoon storm came through. So it was that fresh ionized air in the desert, lovely, lovely feeling. Felt rejuvenated after that, even though I am still a bit warm, still feeling really good. And again, change your filters. I'm gonna keep saying that one. And the final message I think I'll leave you with is fundamentally thinking about this for me, this comes down to a love of quality over a love of profit. So often we're looking at these decisions of like, how are we going to make the bottom line work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I understand that. I very, very, very much understand it. There's a lot of stuff I haven't done at my own house because we can't afford it yet, right? There's a lot of stuff we can't do at people's projects, but love quality before we love profit, right? It's maybe the most important decision that we can make. And imagine the building you're making is for your loved ones because their future very much does depend on what ingredients we use for the buildings as professionals that we create. So I ask you, when someone suggests foam insulation, to give the look that my business partner's son gives when he's offered vegetables. Be skeptical. Ask what's in that. Why are you trying to give that to me? What's up with that? No. And if you're excited about the messages shared, would like to collaborate, whatever, here's our contact information. You can find us on valleyhomes.com or put either of our names in front of @valleyhomes.com. And we have a very active Instagram where we post pretty much every day talking about materials we're using, projects we're working on, and a lot of the logic and building science behind why we do it. So with that, I am going to wrap up and pass this over to Erin. Thank you very much for your time this evening. And yeah, look forward to what Erin has to say.
Thanks, Lucas. That was great.
Wow. Thank you very much, Lucas. I have been looking forward to seeing another one of your presentations for quite a while. It's really cool. Wow. Lucas Johnson, everyone. I want to take a moment to celebrate that presentation. It's a big topic. A lot to discuss. A lot of nuance.
Making me blush here, and I had to go off video because I just chugged like a whole bottle of water here. I don't think I breathed during that entire thing. Might have been a little fast, but a lot to get out there.
Yeah, part of me thinks that we need to just take like a few minutes to just let that percolate into our pores, let our neurons settle a little bit, because there's a lot of important data that has a lot of relevance to the way we use our structures, to installations, to finishes. You know, flex, bones, and skin, they all matter. And there's a lot of complexity and nuance here that doesn't often get discussed in such a comprehensive way. That's why I love working with you, Lucas. It's really, really cool. There's not many of us out here who understand the interactions between air infiltration and moisture management and VOC off-gassing and chemical interactions with our, down to the cellular interface that has with our bodies. Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Aaron. I will try to speak up, but my voice, I woke up this morning with a pretty sore throat, so I'm going to be, it might sound weird over Zoom, I don't know, but I'm not going to push it so I can save my voice for all of tomorrow's meetings. Wow. Cool. Does anyone need a bathroom break or water break or any reason to just take a moment before this next phase? If so, you can either like raise your hand or go off mute and say me. I'll give it like 10 seconds and the silence will be confirmation and consent to move forward. Cool. I'm going to drink some water in the meantime too.
Also, if anyone has any questions for Lucas, please feel free to share them in the chat or unmute. And if you feel comfortable, show or open up your video. So yeah, thanks again, Lucas, for that great presentation.
Mm-hmm.
You're very welcome. And I'm actually muting myself right now. Can you hear the fan in the background? Zoom's pretty good at background noise filtering, but it just dropped down here, right? And that's what I'm talking about earlier. Perfect example of that. The wind picked up, some dust blew in, the sensor read particulate matter in the air, and it stepped itself up, and it worked, but it was also really noisy, right? So that side of things will probably kill most people's motivation to use them unless they're a deep building science nerd like me who's just going to commit and keep it going. Because it's worth trying to live with the experience, right? So that when I'm recommending these things to people, I know what it's actually, the lived experience of them is. Yeah, I'm really jealous of my business partner having got the system that's quiet. That was that was definitely the right choice. Aaron, do we want to show some examples? Maybe, do you have one of a earthen floor that we could pull up?
Yeah. So yeah, overall, what I'd love to do is
Uh-oh.
and so I didn't want to duplicate any of the information shared. I knew Lucas would have a lot of it covered, and see what I can add to. Oh, I just said my internet connection's unstable. Are we okay still?
Yeah, it's okay. It's a little choppy volume wise.
Okay. So yeah, I just wanted to see what I could add and talk about and expand on further. And I think, and just talk about some topics briefly. But I wanted to take the rest of the time after I talk to open up for a kind of like an impromptu roundtable discussion, and see what, there's a lot of topics that I know are really dear to a lot of people's hearts. And yeah, just open it up and see what we wanted to, big space for questions and discussion is hoping for after this. So I won't take up too much time, but I wanted to kind of lay out some more in-depth information and also share some examples. So yeah, Lucas is talking a lot about the big picture and the building science standpoint. How, really big picture overview with a lot of detail on how these systems work together and interface. I'd love to expand into some things that I touched on, such as like the natural material world itself, such as straw bale, hempcrete, to talk about adobe, cob, some natural panels that are out there, straw panels, etc. I wanted to discuss clay. I want to talk about lime a little bit in detail. So I'd love to talk real quick because this is, I want to first also say thank you, Kathy, for your obvious passion and experience and work that you've done in this world to push good things forward into the light and to encourage things to happen in a good way. Hempcrete specifically, and just the hemp industry. And I know that this might not be a popular opinion to say, but I want to just voice it out in the open about this. Hemp, I've done a lot of research also, and I've worked with hempcrete and hemp products a lot in my time as a contractor. And what I've seen in the political side of things and the way that cutthroat capitalism works in our world often, and in these meeting rooms, is that hemp, my opinion is this: hemp could be a great solution if the large marijuana industry players backed off and didn't control the regulatory process in this country and on the global stage, but in particular in this country. It was highly controlled and over-regulated, and the scales were tipped to favor the large, giant corporations that had enough land and enough volume and enough scale to justify the enormous permit fees for every stage of the process. They really intentionally, and I heard this in the meeting room personally, they were very intentional with making sure that the small farmers, which account for 80 to 90% of the people growing food and having land and doing this work, they intentionally kept the small farmers out of this process through very clever and cutthroat capitalist practices and regulatory political things that they did. And so I'm a fan of high biomass bast fibers. Hemp is one of them. There are others. There are others that anyone can grow in their backyard, like tomatoes, that do not have any regulatory barriers or red tape or permit fees and testing and et cetera, all this crap associated that are wrapped around the production of hemp products right now. So any plant, any high lignin bio or a bast fiber plant that grows rapidly, that builds soil, that fixes nitrogen, that clean, is a fantastic solution if it's turned into products in a good way. And there's a lot of good things happening with hemp, but I'm also really passionate about, I can't ignore the economic injustices, the social injustices around that topic. And there are, when that is included in the conversation for me, other solutions come up. And I found other solutions that are fantastic and we use them. And yeah, I've been looking every day I look farther and farther away from hemp as a plant right now because the political layers, as I've discussed. So more on that later. Happy to discuss topics around this as time goes on. Yeah, reach out. I'll leave my contact information in the chat too. Yeah, straw bales have been around for a while. We've been using them. A lot of people in the traditional people in the Southwest part of this of Turtle Island have been using natural materials to build their homes for a very long time, tens of thousands of years. No matter where our ancestors are from, we've been using raw earth and materials to build our shelter. And some of them are still around. We're 10,000 years old. The longest cob structure around. I can go off on the natural build. So I've spent a lot of time over the last decade or so traveling and learning intensely about the science of and the history and the cultural significance of natural building as a topic. From the Southwest to the Northwest to the Northeast to Japan to Portugal and other places in Europe. It's a really important topic to study and integrate into the newer age green building field that has been emerging in the last decade or so. So this is, and one of the reasons I love working with you, Lucas, is your willingness and like passion and excitement for integrating and synthesizing those two big worlds, the performance and the building science, the comprehensive building science of green building as a topic with natural building, the health impacts and the lessons learned in the traditional ways of natural building. And it's rare to find people in the building world that play in both worlds. So clay is a really important material. When we talk about the toxicity of our built environment, the quality of our air we breathe in, from dust floating in the air to managing VOCs, the science of clays, the way clay interacts with water molecules in the suspended in the air is really cool and trippy. In a nutshell, it ionizes the air. Let me just pull up some pictures to talk about this as we're going. I don't think my words are doing this quite justice. Pardon my messy screen. This is my attempt to pull up some pictures to talk about this. So this is a project we did last year in Washington State, where the client was really involved in the process, which was really fun. And we went around and collected cedar, local cedar, and there's another part in the house where we did ferns. And anyway, you can carve, you can stencil, you can, but raw clay plasters on the inside of homes do wonders to manage moisture. By one of the ways it does this is that it absorbs. So the exchange that clay has with the water in the air is remarkable. It absorbs water molecules and then evaporates it at about 50 times smaller of a molecule, or a particle, sorry, that came in. And the way, if you're familiar with the electrostatic properties of water, the smaller the molecule, because it's now a smaller particle, pardon, it is now negatively charged. It's electrolyzed, it's ionized. And that is a passive process that is going to happen forever. There's no need to charge it. There's no need to do anything to that wall. It is going to ionize the air forever. And that ionized water molecule will electrostatically absorb it or attract itself to anything floating in the air, from viruses to bacteria to dust to hair. Anything floating in the air will become now heavier because it's attracting water molecules to it, and it will actively fall out of the air as dust. So one of the things that we find in my office is covered in clay at this point. One of the things I find often is there's dust all over surfaces, but it's an active reminder that it's no longer floating in the air, it's falling out of the air very quickly. And so the air, when I walk into my office, the air is so clean, so fresh, you can feel it. And I get compliments, and I have meetings in here and I have people over, like, wow, this is incredibly fresh. You feel the cleanliness of the air. And it's true. So yeah, you gotta dust things more often, but I'd rather dust it off a surface than breathe it in my lungs. So there's that. And it also buffers the humidity really well. It absorbs excess moisture when there's a lot of it, and then releases it excuse me, when it's drier. So it manages, kind of flattens that graph, the humidity spikes. What else? Some other cool pictures. The process of applying natural plasters is fantastic. I've been working with some really brilliant, good-hearted contractors in the Northwest and the Southwest specifically, that are pushing the edge to productionize natural building, especially in the plaster world. Our one friend up here, his name is Tanner. He runs a company called Northwest Natural Homes, and I design homes for them. I work with their clients, and they have been pushing the edge to use mortar pumps and sprayers to apply clay plaster and lime plaster at a very fast and high quality rate to the inside and out exterior buildings. They came out and plastered one of our, I have a picture of it. Here's another one of their homes. But they've been doing a lot of really good work, and I've been learning a lot from Tanner over the last 10 years about the practicals of natural buildings, and plaster specifically is a very, very smart natural building contractor in the Northwest. So yeah, doing it quickly. They came out and we plastered the exterior of a home in about 2 days, base coat and finish coat, about 1,800 square feet, very quickly. It was very fun. Block materials, so hempcrete, Faswall. There's a few different options for building with natural blocks, natural materials made into blocks that can be very quick, very healthy. This is just a cool picture that shows natural clay plaster as a base coat right there, and then a finish coat that we put on top of that we then pigment using natural mineral pigments, so whatever client's desires are. Yeah, I do want to go right into this real quick and talk about straw bale and rammed earth. This is a fun project that Lucas and I are working on with another awesome building contractor named Ray. And this is a cool house in the Tucson area that uses straw bale as the primary exterior wall system, and then a rammed earth component in the middle. So it's a hybrid structure. And the details associated with this kind of building are really quite simple. They're easy to plan, to detail, to model. Finally, thank you to the work. Big round of applause to blanking on the name, sick brain. The CASBA, California Straw Bale Association. They and many other organizations around there are doing a lot of work to codify natural buildings, specifically straw bale, and they're working on Adobe and Cobb right now. But we now have Appendix S in the International Building Code. It allows us to use prescriptive path plans for designing and building straw bale. That's load-bearing straw bale, as well as post and beam with straw bale infill. Very, very simple and easy to do. You can do like a double stud frame, 3 to 6 feet on center with a little box beam on top to support the trusses or joists, rafters, whatever, and then straw bale fills it in. And the straw bale is a great wall system because not only is it sequestering an enormous amount of carbon because you're growing that material, it's an agricultural waste product, and then baling it very cost effectively and using them to stack large building blocks. But it's a fully breathable, vapor permeable wall system that, when plastered properly, is a very airtight building system that breathes fully. When I say breathes, I know Luke's touched on this, but it means vapor open, vapor permeable. So air can't get in, but water evaporates fully through it. And so that's really important. So moisture doesn't condense and get trapped behind the barrier, the air barrier. And that, again, that's a big problem with spray foam and even drywall. If you have a leaky building, and I say to clients often, like, a Gore-Tex jacket is only good if the windbreaker is on the outside of it. If air is leaking into the insulation cavity, it's not actually effective anymore because insulation works by trapping air. And on average, a statistic I've heard is about 80% or so of our heat is lost through air infiltration. It's coming in through all the seams and working its way into our building and out other seams. So yeah, air tightness is important, but vapor permeability is also really important if you're going to go airtight. So go to a quick section because window openings are really simple. Headers are simple to do. Anyway, we can go into details another time, but I want to say and affirm that natural building can be very straightforward to integrate into any desired aesthetic, whether you want very rounded windows like this, very clean, polished, a clean, polished look, you know, the modern aesthetic. I mean, this is a natural build. This is great, simple, clean, elegant, easy to design and plan. It doesn't, and what I've been finding consulting for and working for architects and architectural designers all over the country right now, it's quite simple. I find it simple to transition their existing plans into other building systems that actually achieve what the performer is looking for. So yeah, if for those of you who have an existing designer, have an existing set of plans, or found a set of plans that you really want, but don't quite vibe with the architectural style, or want the building system to be changed, you know, you can ask me, can I build this with straw bale? Can I build this with a hempcrete alternative? Can I build this with clay? Can I use clay plasters here? The answer is going to be yes, you can. And if you want more information, please get in touch with me. I love sharing information on how to optimize and how to achieve people's dreams without compromising. Quite the contrary, really. Lucas, did you want to talk about this project? Did you want to highlight anything about this project any further?
Sure. I was going to say, and I love the points you were just making, and the point I'll make is actually kind of along these lines too. There's the misconception that natural materials make you have a certain aesthetic, right? And it's not hard to integrate natural materials into almost any aesthetic. I think that's a really key point. But maybe another step to take, or another thing to consider, is the ability of natural materials to become a natural, beautiful, unique finish that fits the local area, that becomes a statement piece, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the really big things that people look for in the Southwest is slot canyons, right? They're an area where you have a narrow canyon, usually some water at the bottom, shade. It's a wonderful refuge in the desert, but usually you're sharing that with a bunch of other people, animals, et cetera, et cetera. It's not, you know, conditioned at all those things, right? So the inspiration we were drawing from, if you pull up the 3D rendering, with this rammed earth, this double rammed earth wall, that situation you see, there's glass on both ends of it. So it's conditioned space that goes all the way through the building, with a sunken floor that has a conversation pit and a yoga zone inside of it, at the client's request. But I think it's also what I would have wanted to do too for this, because the idea is to create this almost like private slot canyon that's your own personal slot canyon. You can enjoy life in, just relax, hang out. It's a great space acoustically for music, so sound is also part of health. The sound that'll occur in this space, as far as conversation, listening to music, et cetera, it should be a very healing, relaxing space. And then the ideal is to put a little, you know, barrio pool, they call them, little tiny pool that can be heated during winter as a hot tub and become like a plunge pool during summer, down at the end, on the outside of this, where we have at my direction, the special badass patio, which will, you know, I'm going to keep that one actually secret for now, but we'll reveal it once it's designed.
Very cool.
It's a really cool idea. But basically the idea is, in a slot canyon, the journey ends when you find the pool at the end of the slot canyon. But building this whole thing, if we just done it out of like wood framed walls, it really couldn't work. But having it literally be rammed earth, where the earth comes from the site and frames a view north-south to the mountains to the north and the mountains to the south, it really, natural materials really do allow you to create those biophilic elements that are so good for our minds. And obviously you need both mental and physical health to be a balanced individual. So from both physical and a mental health standpoint, natural materials can be so rewarding and exciting to work with. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing more of the story. It's one of my favorite parts about designing
And then
homes.
the cool thing, I guess, is since we're designing for comfort and health in this building, it's worth noting that it's also going to be, passive house level performance, super durable from a, water management materials like UV in the desert standpoint. So it should last for a very long time. And with the extensive use of straw bale and cellulose and some wool details, I think we're going to be pretty darn close to carbon neutral up front in this construction. It'll be about 80 to 85% less carbon per square foot than a standard building at minimum. And we may, depending on what straw bales we use, we may actually be carbon storing that up front. So I guess the point is, if you design for health and you design for comfort, you almost always end up with a truly good building. If you're just designing for efficiency or something like that, so often we end up with unhealthy, high carbon impact, et cetera, buildings. But if we really design to optimize health, and we include comfort as part of our definition of health, I would argue that that will then create much better, much lower carbon impact, much more durable buildings than designing for efficiency ever would. And they end up being very efficient buildings. Don't get me wrong, efficiency still happens. It's just not our end goal. You have to go far beyond efficiency to get to healthy.
Wow, to go far beyond efficiency to get to healthy. That's cool.
I've never said that one before. I kind of like that one. Luckily, this is recorded, right?
Yeah.
At this point, do we want to, if anyone else wants to chime in and add some thoughts, you're welcome to turn on cameras, turn on mics. We've got another 20 minutes or so, Nina, 15 minutes.
Yeah. And I just wanted to scroll through one of the contractors I work with in the Pacific Northwest, doing a really cool straw bale build right now.
Is that reclaimed loose straw that they're putting into that?
No, I think it's baled.
Oh, okay. It looks like they were stuffing shavings into that, like wood matrix.
Oh, they might have. Oh, yeah, sure.
Oh, that's a great detail. There's a lot of extra straw on site, right? And it'll rot into methane or burn in carbon dioxide, or you get it stuffed into a creative place and it stays there for a very long time. So,
right.
Yeah.
And on that note, I just want to say, like, the vision that I see is and Kathy, I know you'd vibe with this, because like this is a big part of why people are so passionate about hemp. But if we can incentivize the agricultural industry to grow our building products at a very fast and high biomass way, in a way that's building soil and repairing the land of this earth, then we as a building industry have a responsibility to sell that vision as a solution. Say, hey, we can achieve what you want and store a massive amount of carbon. This building that you want to build is an opportunity to sequester, through the process of growing the material, many tons of carbon. And talk to me about the beam tool, the beam tool. Lucas also knows about the beam tool. There's a cool training I got coming up next week on that. But it's a great calculator that just came out for free, a very comprehensive calculator that can calculate the carbon footprint of your building pretty accurately too. Footprint, either positive or negative.
Very much. And what's crazy to tie these things together, right, is if you use all of those healthy insulations we've been talking about, most of those are the secret weapon to the climate crisis, which is carbon storing insulation. It's pretty crazy. Those lists line up almost exactly. The healthiest insulations that provide the best comfort have the greatest carbon storage. We should be incentivizing those, right, as you're saying. And I think it's a pretty genius insight to think about incentivizing the massive farm industry in the United States to create, I mean, made in American carbon storing good buildings.
Exactly.
That's a powerful message right there. I mean, who wouldn't get behind that one?
And we have to, in the process, make sure that we are not excluding the small farmers.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
we do, we're just perpetuating the same system, same toxic system that got us here in the first place. We're enabling the cutthroat capitalist practices to infiltrate the good solutions that need to be kept in the hands of the people and not the elite corporations that are actually using it to, I mean, look at how much land just got acquired by Bill Gates. Look at how much land just got acquired by very top corporations, by the giant elite marijuana industry corporations that ask who, just, I want to encourage and invite curiosity. Questions like, who actually wrote the regulations for the hemp industry? Who controlled that process? Because if you look into that, you might be surprised, or you won't be surprised. Some of it, if you're like me. But it's not as pretty as I just want to, be the blunt one that says there's, not everything shiny is actually good for us, even though it might seem like it.
Oh, I mean, most things that are shiny are probably bad for us, right? I mean, that's done, the shiniest, like chocolate I was learning, right? It literally has shellac on it to create that sheen. Like
Right.
shellac primer, the stuff that's really bad for us, it literally comes from the same source, and to create a sheen. Like the things that are shiny are not necessarily good for us. And the other thing that to tie in with the political advocacy side of things, it's incredibly important if we want to have a chance of building healthy buildings at scale, because right now these materials frankly don't exist at scale.
Right.
It's very hard to get some of these materials at the moment. Supply chains, pandemic, demand, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Can I say a few things?
Hold on. Yeah. And
Can I say a few things?
Yes, and yes, Kathy, in 1 second.
After you're done there, could I just interrupt and say a few things? Thank you. Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so I guess my point is, if we want to have a chance at making healthy building a scalable thing, that's going to make a real difference in terms of societal scale things like carbon impact, we really do need to figure out how to encourage small production to make these materials available in the United States, so that they're consistently available and affordable. Because right now we literally can't scale more than we're at. Like, we're kind of at the limits of what's available, and we're not doing that many of these buildings.
Yeah.
So Kathy, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, I didn't get to say this when the recordings started, but just Kathy Ging, KATHYGING on Facebook, for the past 2 years of research on industrial hemp building products worldwide, 25 nations, 25 categories, 350 products, in Jean Lotus's book that was published this year. And it's now reduced to $49. I think she has it online too, finally. But I want to say electromagnetic field issues are something that a lot of people ignore, and women are more involved with this, being hurt by it. There was a woman that called me from California who had spent $150,000 of her and her husband's retirement money. They had both been software engineers, ironically, and they couldn't find a safe place to live in California because her EMF sensitivity had erupted when she lived in the other side of the condo from a wireless smart meter installation. And when you get a whole bank of those and babies sleeping next to them, it's a disaster. But anyway, I found out that she moved into a PV solar home, and she had to have the solar array disconnected because of the inverter. I guess the transmission mechanism was the problem. But apparently Germany has 2 different eco routers. So that's something for you people to know who are in the building trade. And I want to say that we in Eugene influenced Oregon's largest publicly owned utility, eWeb, to influence census to change the technology so it doesn't transmit as much. It's kind of a FlexNet system, and you can even have it turned off even though the meter's turned on. I personally spent $8,000, 8 years and 8,000 hours of my real estate time working on this movement. So I'm a mini expert in it, although not trained in it. Another thing I want to say, a tragedy of the commons is the eco building movement. And I helped kickstart that here in Eugene and Oregon. And also I kickstarted the solar energy movement in Southern Oregon. The tragedy of the commons is both of these movements became the domains of the well-to-do and kind of petered out. Let's not do that with the hemp movement. And that's why I'm working in my future life here. I'm working to try to develop an international industrial hemp skills, service, and tools network to accelerate movement worldwide. I was the director of the Community Skills Bank in Southern Oregon, and that lasted for 8.5 years with 800 skills and services, 22 categories. It was a Kickstarter event in Southern Oregon when all the hippies were there smoking pot, helping each other out. So that's what I envision. And I totally want everybody to join USHBA, United States Hemp Building Association, ushba.org, a team of about 25, mostly men, engineers, architects, activists, designers. They put together the matrix to allow the IRC to approve the hemp building as the code to allow hemp. So you can take that information now from the IRC approved material to the local building departments. And on the ushba.org site, you will see at least 3 or 4 dozen hemp homes around the country, including Bellingham, Washington. Pamela Bosch, like Bosch, the dishwasher, on Facebook, has the house that she built. And
my mom actually lives around the corner from that house.
Oh, are you kidding? Come
Yeah.
on. Oh,
Yeah,
hey, Lucas, I'm looking for you on Facebook. I can't find you. Can you?
I don't exist on Facebook. Okay. I'm only on Instagram these days.
Okay. I don't do Instagram. I'm too old for Instagram. But listen, the last thing I would just say is that hempbuilding.com is the go-to site. Steve Allen, ALLIN, from Ireland, offers a consultancy for $150 an hour, and it's less money for third world countries. But he is the Porter honor of the 10th International Hemp Building Symposium in France, October 11th to 12th, which I'm registered for. It's $200 online, and it includes a woman named Monica. I think she works in Spain and Germany, but her Moroccan student team won the award for $120,000 hemp house. It looks like a flying saucer with what's called flexible solar cells backed by hemp wool insulation, completely off grid. It was half the price of all the other hemp entries in the competition, $120,000 for a 720 square foot house. So maybe we should turn this movement over to the students. And thanks for listening and sharing. I learned so much from you guys. I'm mind boggled because I mean, I've been a realtor for 35 years and my head's been in the, houses doing things, just getting frustrated. Like I said in the notes there, I almost died after I installed a 65% wool carpet with 35% acrylic in my living room. And in the middle of the night, 3:30, I literally stopped breathing. I had to go to the emergency room and they had to give me 2 15-minute sessions to breathe again. It turns out that 80% of the floor coverings in this country are carpet because of the powerful carpet lobbying industry. An average of 150 chemicals goes into making carpet.
Carpet's
And
really bad.
I was the perfect tester because I've been, sprayed by termiticides and flea balm. I can't tell you all the stuff that I've been subject to as my occupation of trying to show houses. But at any rate, they did help me. But I told the carpet installer to air out the carpet and the pad for 48 hours. He totally ignored me. And I would say that the carpet that's made out of the carpet pad that's made out of recycled material is actually more toxic than the virgin carpet pad because they use glues to put it together. Yep. And I was saying in the chat there, a friend of mine, he actually influenced me to move to hippie farm in Southern Oregon, David Sieber. He was the co-inventor of the hempshields.com, seed oil that can make longevity of wood 10 times longer for fences and decks. And I've used it on 2 fences now. And you apply a very, very thin coat, but it's a 0 VOC oil. And if you want the VOCs in it, you
I
can
actually, I went to their website a few minutes ago, and that is like a cool looking product. Fences, any wood gets destroyed super quick here in the desert, and it's very hard to find something that doesn't smell for 2 weeks, even outside. That would be, applicable. So I'm gonna try that stuff out. You also, Kathy, reminded me of something I did forget to mention, which is even if the product itself is made of good ingredients, the other thing is what is it shipped in and how is it treated to ship? So like a lot of times, even a pure wool carpet or something that, unless you had a wool allergy, shouldn't trigger an issue. If it's being shipped internationally, it's going to be wrapped in plastic and often treated with certain chemicals to prevent insects and stuff from getting in there during the shipment. They will often say you need to air stuff out for days before you bring it inside. No one reads that, pays attention. Excited the new carpet arrives, you roll it out, you sit in the living room looking at it, breathing in all of that crap. So that's something we really do need to consider, is even if the material itself is good, what has it been treated with in order to ship it? That's a really, especially for instantaneous exposures for occupants once they live there, or when you're a contractor and you're receiving a shipment, open stuff in well-ventilated spaces and have your crews do that. Because honestly, you can be very surprised how nasty chemicals are inside shipments when you're opening the material, cutting that plastic the first time. It's this big puff of chemicals.
Well,
If you
see,
slap yourself
especially
in fast
babies.
enough,
See,
you'll know.
babies and children are so much closer to the carpet, and their kidneys and lungs and liver, they're very tiny. They can't process this stuff. And Cecil Smith was really the genius. When he came down, he inspired us in Eugene to start the Eco Building Guild chapter here. I attended 130 presentations in about the 14 or so years that we existed. We fell apart during the recession. Frankly, a bunch of guys got a hold of it and they let it die, the way I could put it. But another tragedy of the Commons, it was my suggestion that we start actually putting reviews of the contractors. And as soon as I said that, my head and arms were, I was decapitated and I was like dejawed and just attacked and maligned. And it's like people cannot stand to be evaluated and criticized in a movement that's really hard to make a dime in, frankly. And a lot of the eco builders just didn't proceed that way because there weren't enough people to support the habit of getting products that sometimes weren't as good as others. Like you remember the recycled PET bottle carpet. Well, if you didn't buy the higher grade, and if you tried to put it on steps, it would also wear a little bit, long and stuff like that. And then, the casein, the milk product, and some of the paints, the woman who was a lawyer painted her house and it smelled like sour milk. I mean, there's a learning curve in all these things. But listen, what happened to environmental building supplies? They were my go-to people up in Washington and Oregon. So is anybody replacing them up there?
That is one thing we didn't cover and that we should probably do. I mean, what I'd say is all the sponsors of the Eco Building Guild and the people who help us put on these events are the people to look to. We try to find people who align with our mission deeply in order to work together and, have these kind of sponsorships. So, Green Home Solutions is in Seattle. They're wonderful. Small Planet Supply is a great organization in Olympia. My former employer, 475 High Performance Building Supply, the longest name of all time. It's a group of building nerds that got together to import products from Europe. So that's the name that seemed to make sense. And great organization. They're based in New York, but there's a guy, Ian, my former colleague who took over when I left. Wonderful guy. He's based in Bend, Oregon. So there's a lot of good supplies out here. FSC wood is easier than ever to get in a lot of ways from most lumber yards will have at least something. It might just be like,
But what happened to environmental building supplies in Portland and Seattle?
I only moved up to Seattle in the 2010 around then. So I never worked with them.
Oh, you didn't? Okay, well, it changed its name to EcoHaus, Haus. It was Marcus Stoffel from Switzerland who really taught the whole Northwest about eco products. And you could call up and get the lowdown on cork and marmoleum and all that stuff. By the way, have you found, Lucas, that the marmoleum is really not good if you get into a situation where you could get some mildew in the floor? I helped introduce it to one of the floor covering shops here, but they did not give me the product you're supposed to cover the marmoleum with. And the marmoleum went bad for a few different reasons. And a builder told me they didn't realize that bacteria can get into the darn thing. And do you use a coating on your marmoleum?
I was lucky enough that the guy who Aaron and I are working with on this project in Tucson, Ray Clemens at Natural Building Works, absolutely wonderful guy, born, raised Tucson, been here forever. One of his good buddies was a cool guy who happens to specialize in marmoleum installation. I don't know what products he used, but it was a zero VOC adhesive and a zero VOC sealant that he used. I think it's mostly around the perimeter where that it can happen, was my understanding, because that's where he spent most of his time doing the sealing. Regardless, it's that's one of the key points that I was hoping to make today, and is worth reiterating, is that even when you've specified good materials, you still need to follow a good process to install them properly as well. Good materials are no guarantee of success. It's just the first step in the right direction. So, you know, make sure you're using good materials, but then also make sure you protect those good materials with proper layers, whether that's coatings or air barriers or what vapor barriers below your slab or whatever it may be.
Well, you know, along those lines, as I've been a realtor for 35 years, I've seen some of the bamboo floors buckle. And what I found out is that some of the bamboo floor companies selling on the internet were using old machines retooled from the Vietnam War to make bamboo. Well, the one that I bought was rated #1 in Consumer Reports, harder than hardwood floor, mind you, harder than oak. But I'll tell you, when I was with Senator Ron Wyden and some other people downtown Eugene, we had a special meeting of hemp people around the country. And the director of the Global Hemp Innovation Center pulled out a piece of the wood block and showed me the Kentucky hemp hardwood floor. I go, wow, this is just as beautiful as the bamboo. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And there's a lot of hemp carpet out there too now, you know.
I've been looking at hemp oak for flooring. I have a couple samples of it. That's pretty cool. I mean, just like most of these floors, it's, you know, wood laminate, though it's a surface layer with stuff below it, right? So it's a really, again, just ask the questions like, what are the ingredients? If it's hemp, but it's put together with toxic glue to save some money, maybe that's not such a good thing to put in the building.
I think they're using some kind of soy glue maybe, but listen.
Yeah, no, the good companies are using much better glues.
Good.
And like also think about tying back this other theme about water vapor and how water is going to destroy all good intentions unless you control it properly. You put in a bamboo floor over, say, a concrete subfloor that has no vapor control in it, you're going to have crazy amount of vapor pressure that's going to also cause the flooring to swell and compress a little bit. So that flooring eventually is going to get floppy unless you've put in a proper vapor control layer, right? So, and then that's probably getting ripped out and something else is put in, and maybe you've lost someone on good building products for life because they're like, oh, I tried natural materials once, I did a bamboo floor, it sucked, I'll never do natural materials again, when really it's just they didn't install the natural material correctly. And then the myth of natural materials not working well continues, right? It is really a myth that's perpetuated so that the big companies who have multi-billion-dollar, business lines they're running, they want to protect those business lines, and natural materials are a big threat to those.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. And I'll give you one alert because I've been doing a lot of reading about this hemp wood. It's not maybe perfect in a humid setting, like maybe the Pacific Northwest, if you don't heat a lot of rooms in your house. Like I leave the door open to some of my rooms, but I don't turn the heat on in the winter. So I would be cautious about using hemp until they perfect it more. But do you remember the EIFS product that was like a stucco replacement? Well, my boyfriend at the time was an architectural designer, although you're not allowed to use that phrase unless you're an architect, but he designed the 4,000 square foot pyramid in the Oregon coast south of Yachats, was a Bucky Fuller tetrahedron. But Monty Marshall, he was a guy who was promoting, you know, this kind of architecture. Well, what I would like to see, I'd like to see a tetrahedron hemp building, okay, with the hemp floor and the hemp roof and the hemp carpet and the hemp battery and the hemp plastic car outside. Well, yeah, and so the thing I want to bring up on recording here is a guy named David Milner has a patent on a hemp battery. And as Steve D'Angelo, the author of the Cannabis Manifesto, said at Canna Emerge conference I attended online, is that the hemp batteries are supposedly not fire prone like lithium ion. And when you see 10,000 gallons of water needed to put out that fire, in a California newscast that showed up in Eugene too, and you saw a car automatically catching on fire parked in a Los Angeles street, and then the fire department carrying away another electric vehicle that self-combusted after the fire had been put out, we have to be very careful not to switch to these cars. This is what makes I just get the chills right now thinking we're going to do the wrong thing like we did with lead-based paint, like we did with asbestos. I mean, they took all the asbestos out of schools and it was worse than they should have left it in and encapsulated it, as they called it. And now we're going to do the same thing with the fires. And so everybody's making a lot of money with the lithium ion batteries, but we've seen the laptops in the holds of planes cause fires. I mean, it's like we just are too capitalistic, and that's all I'll say.
Well, and regardless of regardless of safety risks, which are obviously an important thing, but it's not like lithium ion, the supply chain for lithium ion is some innocent bystander in the whole carbon picture and health picture of the world. That's a very toxic, very high carbon impact supply chain. So if there are materials, so like electric cars are achieving a great utility, fossil-free transportation, right? That utility is wonderful. But if that utility, and you could draw an analogy to high performance building there, if that utility is being achieved with fundamentally bad materials, that might not necessarily work out well numbers wise, right? So if you're using spray foam to build a passive house, uncomfortable, unhealthy, high carbon impact, right? Lithium ion is probably not the ideal source for batteries for the exact same reasons. It's the exact same scientific logic that applies. Is how do we better understand what these whatever we're using, what are the ingredients that make it, and how do we achieve that same utility with better ingredients? That's a question we need to ask a lot more.
Okay, I'm going to say one more thing. I said I wasn't going to say anything, but I want to say that nobody's thinking of this scenario except me, and I've been spreading it around on Facebook. You picture the person coming home from a 2-week vacation in California, coming over the mountain, parks the electric vehicle, needs to be charged up. A friend of mine, her daughter in Southern California, they were told on the news not to charge up your electric vehicles. You're going to ruin the grid. And we only have 10% electric vehicle part of the mix right now. Okay, so you get home from vacation, you can't charge up your battery. If you don't have a hybrid, alternative liquid fuels and batteries, you're not going to get out of Dodge. The other thing, the other dirty little secret about electric vehicles, besides the fire-prone batteries, is the fact that hundreds of thousands of neighborhood nukes are being planned. I religiously cut out newspaper articles. Really, for 40 years, I've been doing this. I'm an information addict. But I'll tell you what, only one article I found about the hundreds of thousands of nukes that are ahead. So all these 350.org people, yeah, I bless their souls. But hey, I was at the Oregon State Fair in 1982 with a 2,400 square foot solar energy exhibit called Oregon Energy Roundup, and I helped kickstart the whole thing. And here we are now doing the wrong thing again, because these electric vehicles are going to tax the grid. And do you know that if you take down 9 grids in this country, 9 transmission or whatever, you will shut down the whole grid of the United States. This is a major documentary. This isn't like YouTube or BitChute. No, this is the major documentary. So we have the nuclear plants in Corvallis, Oregon. NuScale has been working for about 10 years. Well, if you want to hear the lowdown on what that's all about, listen to the Native Americans and the Public Interest Environmental Law Conference, the largest environmental conference in the world for lawyers and activists in Eugene for 40 some years, PIELC.org. Listen to the panel with the Native Americans and Lloyd Marbett from Portland, who helped shut down Trojan, which was the largest operating nuclear power plant in the country, next to the largest active volcano, Mount St. Helens at the time, and that got shut down. But see, I mean, we are so nearsighted. I mean, I just beat my head because I'm only one person, but I just feel like we're going in so many wrong directions again. End of story.
Mhm. Thank you, Kathy, for bringing all that. Bringing you. Yeah, there's I sit on the planning commission in the city of Olympia, and I hear very often about the statistics of our need for new units and our ability to keep up. And just looking at the economics from at least a narrow, specific standpoint, seeing that there's a hell of a need, there's a hell of a demand for more spaces for people to lock a door and have a dry roof over their head, at least. And that's without really discussing all the people sleeping in doorways and benches and in the forests and tents
And
in their
it's
cars, RVs.
a sufficient solution if we just hand them toxic housing that's not comfortable, right? It's just all these things can come together so well. The grid overload, health, natural buildings, social justice. If you have a healthy natural building, you don't need much of a mechanical system to run it. Very,
Right.
very low energy, very healthy, comfortable space, help rejuvenate someone's life. If we think people are going to recover from drug addiction by being put in some uncomfortable, toxic building, we're
Right.
insane. That's not happening, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's well intended, don't get me wrong, but it's just scientifically ridiculous.
Yeah.
We do need to wrap this up. We're a bit over our time, but it's been a wonderful conversation. I need to jump also because I'm going to have a very sad 7-year-old if I don't help put her to bed right now. So
Mhm.
if you've heard some knocking at the door and a little voice in the background, that's what's going on. That's why I disappeared a second ago.
Yeah, just want to wrap my piece up by saying every time that there's something to be built, there is an opportunity for X, Y, and Z, environmental, social justice things, and economic. And building is an opportunity to heal.
Yeah.
You can heal in our buildings. I've seen it, experienced it, just to choose better solutions and get curious and learn more.
Yeah, as we've said this a few times, right? It's not about being non-toxic, it's about being healthy. Non-toxic's a minimum requirement in my mind. Healthy is an aspirational goal.
Yeah.
Aspirational goals are a lot more fun to work on. So
Choose healthy.
let's do it.
Change your filters.
Yeah,
Change your filters.
change your filters. Thank
Change
you.
your filters. Well, thanks all. This has been really fun. I love these discussion kind of sessions afterwards, and we always meet just wonderful people like yourself, Kathy, and others. And seems like every event we meet someone new with amazing ideas and just knowledge and history too behind these important topics. So thanks all. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I will probably have to end the